part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Before we get to today's episode, I want to take a few moments to tell you about our presenting sponsor, Aligned Health Center. Aligned Health Center is the first chiropractic biophysics clinic in Northern Ohio serving patients in Westlake. The team at Aligned Health Center helps patients with back pain, neck pain, migraines, ADHD, digestive issues, sleep disturbance, whiplash, scoliosis, and much more. The mission at Aligned Health Center is simple: to help people in the Westlake and Beechwood areas achieve the best possible health and overall wellness. They know what it's like to have constant neck and back pain. It's no fun, and they are here to help. And as a special offer for Cavs on the Break listeners, Aligned Health Center is offering a free exam to our incredible fans. That's right, you heard us correctly, a free exam at no cost just for you. Call Aligned Health Center at 440-230-6865 or visit their website at alignedhealthcenters.com to make an appointment and to learn more about how Aligned Health Center can help you. Mention Cavs at checkout to receive the free offer. Again, that's 440-230-6865 or visit alignedhealthcenters.com. Now let's get to the show.
Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
Hey, what's good? Thanks for tuning in to Cavs on the Break and NBA podcast. We're your hosts, John Sabol, alongside with Sam Amico at Amico Hoops on Twitter. Connect with him there or read his content, the owner and operator, editor of hoopswire.com. You can follow me at John_Sabol. Follow the pod at Cavs on the Break. You can follow my pod at Sabol Brothers right here on the Press Play Podcast Network, or watch me on Fox 8 News here in Cleveland. Sam, good to hear you, man. What's good?
You know what you forgot to mention? You can also read about you in some of my columns there on HoopsWire, because I mentioned you in the column, which I'm sure was a huge thrill for the entire family.
You know, you mentioned that to me before we recorded, and I didn't know that. And
yeah, because you don't read my columns.
well, I usually it's funny. I usually do, but I haven't for the last couple of days because the Cavs have spiraled out of control. So therefore, I'm not really into reading right now because I'm just watching this thing unravel. But I appreciate the shout out. I am quite honored. I feel like I owe you something.
Well, we could decide that. There's probably a Whitey's in there, or you know.
I like it.
Or a McDonald's. I don't know. You can pick.
I think a Whitey's is good. Maybe if we did this without Chase again, I think he'd get a little jealous.
Yeah. We have to be careful what we say about Chase on here because I've learned that he listens.
He listens, yes.
Chase. I got to face him next week. So,
you know, Chase was supposed to do it this week with you, but he had other things that popped up, and I was gladly to hang in and pop in for him. So, yeah. By the way, Chase, you and I have been playing like phone tag for like 2 weeks, bro, and we get random texts. So, where you been, man? Like, I know he was just in Cleveland. You met up with him lunch. I was working, so I couldn't see him, but like I would like to catch up with my man, but he's too busy, you know.
I made him come to Panera where I work. I work out of the Paneras. I write out of the Paneras. And so he said, where should we go? And I said, we're going to Panera because I get, a member of the coffee club. That's just where I do my thing. So that's where I take all of my important meetings.
Well, you did that one time with me back in, I think, November. And you had just witnessed a car accident inside Panera, not outside on the street.
It drove into the Panera. It drove in through the back, the back entrance, and that was quite an experience. Just the sound of glass flying, and fortunately, everybody was okay. And but yeah, I think we were talking when it happened, or shortly after it happened. So
I was walking my dog when I was talking to you on the phone that day. You told me that. And then
those are days you don't forget.
And then like a week before the All-Star game, I was driving into work. I called you to ask you a question about something, and you had just witnessed another accident somewhere around Akron.
In Medina, near Medina and Wadsworth. that was a scary car accident that we were talking on the phone while I was driving, and I saw it and saw it happen live, and it was scary. It seemed like everybody was okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's only two, one driver in each car, but yeah. So maybe we should talk on the phone list. I'm sure everybody's tuning in to hear about all of this excitement. By the way,
yeah, and I'm glad to hear
Cavs lately.
I'm glad to hear all those people in those car accidents that we're talking during that time are okay. I don't know how else we could segue from that dark conversation other than to go right into it with the Cavs. Man, Sam, I got to say, I went to my first Cavs game as a fan since the 18 finals, now that I've moved back to Cleveland and working here. And I went to the Bulls game a couple nights ago, and that was absolutely brutal. I was texting you through it. I went with a couple of buddies of mine, and man, it's been a tough sledding for them, because ever since then, the Cavs, they beat Orlando, then they've lost to Dallas, and tonight, as we record this on Thursday, March 31st, they lost to the Hawks in a absolute dismal performance. Now, we say all this not to rip the team, because we know what's going on with them. They are losing players left and right. They're limping into the playoffs, and when I mean limping, I literally mean limping. This team is just they're you can sneeze on a player and they're going to be out 6 to 10 weeks with a torn rotator cuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the injuries are just out of control.
Well, if you really look at it, John, they have, I hate to use this phrase, but it's really true. They do have their own big three. Okay. Now, granted, they're young, but those guys really constitute a big three that you are building around. And that, of course, is Darius Garland, an all-star, Jared Allen, an all-star center, and then Evan Mobley, who's the front runner for NBA Rookie of the Year. Okay. So now you've taken two of those guys. Injuries have taken two of those guys in Allen and Mobley and sidelined them. And that leaves you with Darius Garland and role players. Okay. Now, that's not, it's calling people role players isn't an insult, but that's really what they have. And they're nice role players. Don't get me wrong, the rest of the team, but role players aren't going to carry the day. Okay. I mean, we've seen that, especially at this time of year when teams, this Eastern Conference race, I've been doing this 20 years. This Eastern Conference race is the closest I've seen this late in this season, where teams 1 through 10 really are still working to position themselves and can potentially position themselves not only move up a spot to say 4 to 3, but can move up, in this case, 4 to 1. One can fall to 4. It's crazy. And then it's the same way 5 through 10, where, now we're getting a better idea who's going to finish where, but we still don't know. And these last 5 regular season games, not just for the Cavs, but for the Raptors, the Bulls, the Hawks, the Hornets, all of these teams really in the 5 through 10 range, they got to take care of business in these last 5 games. So unfortunately for the Cavs, as I said, you're missing not only 2 of your big 3, but the 2 tall ones, 2 7-footers who really make an impact defensively. Both are underrated in the impact that they make offensively. And, now you have Garland out there, try as he might. It's just a lot to ask for a guy, who's really having his best season, obviously, but really facing a lot more double teams, a lot more attention, because you're missing, even if Allen and Mobley weren't as good as they are, they're starters. So take those 2 guys out, John. And it's just right now, it's just a lot to overcome. They look exhausted. And they look, I don't want to say they look defeated, because I don't think that's the case. If they come across as if, what else can we do but what we're doing? And it's just not been enough lately.
I think there's a fine line, Sam, where you can call someone or a team looking defeated or looking exhausted. To me, they look exhausted. Defeated, just, I mean, this team has been down and out all season, and they've never really looked defeated. They've looked exhausted.
Yeah.
And even them going through the motions in this 131-107 loss to the Hawks, I mean, they just had no business playing in this game just because they were mentally not there. I mean, they were down, 13 at the half, and they came out the second half flat, played absolutely zero defense. Atlanta, shot all over them, Atlanta shot 43% from beyond the arc, 17 of 39. Can you believe that? I mean, wow. It's just incredible. So, but they were going through the motions, but their body language to me just doesn't show that they're not. Yes, they're not. I'm not trying to contradict myself here. I'm trying to explain myself here. They're going through the motions because I think they're mentally and physically exhausted, but they're also not, just giving up either. I mean, I think there's a fine line between that, and I think there's a difference. And when you give up, you look defeated. There's guys on there that are still playing hard, and they're all playing hard. They're just looked exhausted. They're tired, man. And
they look like they're spent, like they have nothing left now.
And you can't blame them for that. I mean,
no, you cannot.
You can't rip them for that. No one's really attacking this team's integrity or their character or their hustle. I mean, that's not the case at all. They've been dealt. Yes, every team deals with injuries. If I hear anybody else say that in the national media about the Lakers or about the Nets, I'm gonna, just irritating. No team has been affected by more injuries than the Cavs. This is not me being front run bandwagon bias person. It's the facts. Every single person on this team, for the most part, has been dealt with some type of injuries, all the way down for extended amount of time, different points through the season. And have the Cavs been at full strength this entire time before the All-Star break, like we're all high and mighty on them, they're probably fighting for a 3 or 4 spot in the East. That's obviously not the case now. They're fighting the play-in game. And if they, I don't know, we'll talk about the play-in game here in a moment. But if they don't watch themselves, they could find themselves even farther out of the play-in game, with 5 games to play. So, it's no one's fault. No one's going to rip on anybody. We're not going to go ahead and rip on Bickerstaff, anybody. No, because he's the coach of the year. He should win it. Kevin Love should win 6th man of the year. Evan Mobley should win rookie of the year. So it's just a recipe for disaster in terms of what's happening based on the injuries. And there's nothing else anybody, what, you can bring in Red Auerbach from the grave and he's not coaching this team to the NBA championship. It's just not happening.
Well, yeah.
What I mean?
I think that right now there's really no one to blame. I'm with you on that. Other than, the timing of these injuries, but to your point, how many teams in the NBA could take their leading scorer off their team from last season and have the type of year that the Cavs did? Because don't forget, Colin Sexton led this team in scoring last year, averaging 24 points a game. You removed him after 8 games for the season, or you didn't, but injury did.
Right. I know.
And yet they continued to fight. Then you lose Ricky Rubio, to the similar injury. And he was such a huge part of everything they were doing, averaging a career high 13.1 points, just really just settling down the offense. And then you lose him, and then you've had multiple times where you've had Mobley out for various reasons with injuries. You had Okoro, who's, underrated in the role that he serves. You had him out for a while, and I'm not going to name them all because just about everybody suffered a Markkanen, LeVert right after the trade, or right after the All-Star break. And then obviously Darius Garland's been in and out with back issues or had been. So it's really been, like you said, something that, yes, I know that the Nets had a lot of injuries and they made the trade and they still haven't got Ben Simmons in the lineup. So a lot of teams have dealt with it. The Lakers, we hear about Anthony Davis and LeBron coming in and out all the time. But to me, when you talk about a team that was very clearly on the rise and still is, the Cavs still are, but the season that they were having, like you said, you would think that they would be in the mix for, at worst, the number 5 seed heading into the playoffs, because that's where they were when they were totally healthy. So The culture's good. The culture's strong, and that's what matters, because it's never really been about this season anyway. Mm-hmm. I think that they've made greater strides this year than they anticipated, and I think that you really have something to build off of, and you don't need to hang your head right now because you're probably not going to finish real strong. But Allen and Mobley supposedly could be back for the play-in tournament. You win that game and you're in, so at least if you finished in the top 8, right now, unfortunately, they're matched up with the Nets in the first game of the play-in tournament.
That's not ideal.
So, right. So, but it would be better to play the Nets. Let's say you lose, and then the Hawks and Hornets would have to battle it out. And let's say the Hornets win that game, you get them, and you win that game, you're in. So if you have Mobley and Allen and Garland, those 3 being the key guys that you want out there for sure, and then the other guys fill in nicely around them. And I mean, we haven't even mentioned Dean Wade, which is obviously not a huge deal, but he was a very nice role player, has been a nice role player for them, and now he's out for the season. So there's been a lot working against them. And I think at this point, like you said, they're just exhausted and they need some help. And hopefully that help will be on the way. If not before these 5 games are up, then certainly for the play-in tournament.
Yeah. And you know what? I want to get in on the Mobley and Allen point here in a moment. I also want to get in on the up-to-date standings. Before we do, I want to kind of go back to this game here against the Hawks, where the Cavs got blown out again, 131-107. Sam, they, it just was a dismal game. I'm not going to go deep into it. It's kind of pointless at this point in the stage, because they got to turn around and go. They're on the back end of a back-to-back against Dallas on Wednesday, and then they head to New York for a rare matinee game there at 1:00 in the Garden. But you talk about a team that, to my point, where they're not defeated. When you hear JB Bickerstaff's post-game press conference, and I want to play about 50 seconds of it real quick for you. I think you hear it in his voice that they're not defeated. You can tell that it is an exhaustion, a mental exhaustion, and it's not it is not a attitude thing, and because they know it. So I want to play a quick bite, his opening statements from the game tonight against Atlanta. And I want you to reflect on what he had to say.
I thought we did some things that, were bad habits. And if you continue to allow them to happen, they're going to stick with you. So we need to make sure we pay attention to those things. But then from there, we need to move on. I think just offensively, we did a lot of standing and watching tonight. We played a lot of one-on-one basketball without any movement or sharing the ball or cutting or respacing to help one another. So we were just going to make it difficult on one guy to go out and get something done and create something. And then defensively, I just don't think we played with enough force. Obviously, they're a high-power offensive team, but at some point, you have to hold your ground and pick something to take away. And I thought tonight we gave up everything.
You can hear it right there. Obviously, when you're standing around not playing defense and you're going to one-on-one basketball, you're exhausted. You're tired. You're checked out, maybe going through the motions, but it's not a defeated thing. It's not an attitude. It's not being selfish. It's more of a, man, like, we just came back on a back-to-back. We're playing with 2 guys we just signed off from that worked at 7-Eleven down the street. No disrespect to Moses Brown or Marcus Goodwin, RJ Nembhard, excuse me. Yeah. Well, 3 guys actually, technically. But you know what I mean? Like, these are guys that weren't in the league 2 months ago, 3 months ago. They weren't even on anybody's radar. And you're relying on them for minutes, and they're playing well in the minutes that they're getting. Nembhard didn't play tonight, but Goodwin played 18 minutes, 11 points, and Moses Brown played 26 minutes, had 15 points. I mean, they're playing great. I make that analogy as a joke because that's pretty much what this whole league has been in this year, especially with the early December wave of COVID, where you're picking up guys that either A, shouldn't have been in the league that are past their prime, or guys you're just picking up off the street. These guys were just those type of players, but they're just, again, showing you where this team is at in terms of roster spots and losing guys. So react real quick, Sam, if you don't mind, on JB Bickerstaff's comments there, and if you agree with my take or not.
Well, yeah, I would say that I agree with everything, particularly the ball has not, if you've watched the offense, and that's where I say that Mobley and Allen are so valuable. We only think of them, particularly Allen, in terms of defense, but really the offense has really been greatly impacted for several reasons. One, I'll start with Mobley, is that he's an excellent passer, an excellent facilitator for a power forward. You know, he sees the floor. He usually makes the right play. We've heard, you know, Austin Carr and Campy Russell on the broadcasts have talked all year about how this guy is not your typical rookie when it comes to his knowledge of the game and ability to make the right play. Whereas a lot of rookies, you know, takes them some time to adjust to the speed of the game. Mobley has been able to, as a young guy, be able to see the game kind of as it's almost in slow motion. And he's so valuable offensively. Even when he's not scoring a lot of points, he's making the right plays, keeping the ball moving. And then you think about Jared Allen offensively, you know, so much ability to set the screen, roll to the basket. Darius Garland's always been throwing him those lobs. You know, we saw that earlier this year. His presence on offense is greatly missed. So that's a big thing that Coach Bickerstaff talked about that I think is right on, is the fact that offensively they have been doing a lot of standing around, kind of watching Darius try to make something happen. And there's not been a lot of aggressiveness. Obviously, that's not the biggest problem. The bigger problem right now is defense. You're missing your rim protectors. You know, you're missing Allen at the basket. You're missing Mobley at the basket in terms of not only against opposing big men, but keeping opposing guards kind of hesitant to drive to the basket because those two big guys are waiting for them. But what I will say is I agree with JB Bickerstaff in the sense that they're not playing with enough, and I like the use of the word force when it came to defense. They're really not. They're not being physical enough for this time of year, because this is when veteran teams know the tricks of the trade and know what they can get away with physically in terms of, you know, just putting a body on the opponent and, you know, just being more physical and more aggressive. And the Cavs have not, the guys who are on the floor have not picked up on that yet. So that said, that makes it difficult right now. And we've seen the results, and, you know, hopefully they can kind of get back, because they are determined. They do want to win. I think that they still believe, but they got to get a win just so that they can kind of say, okay, now we can reset after this win.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there is still fire left in these guys. They're still confident. You know, they know what they need to do. You hear Darius Garland talk about it. You hear Lamar Stevens talk about it after that Bulls game and after that win against the Magic. And even if you go back to the loss to the Raptors on last Thursday, the 24th, when they both talk about playing tight, and they feel that playoff pressure. They feel that they're looking at the standings a little bit. And obviously this is before the Mobley injury, but you know, easier said than done, but everyone is aware of it. They've got a tough back end of the schedule here, but they need to at least salvage some of these games to, if anything, to boost some of their confidence. You think about it, Sam, it wasn't too long ago when we were talking about on this podcast, and when we had our podcast event at Whitey's in Richfield, when the Cavs were about I think it was like a week to 10 days before the All-Star break in February. They're a half a game out of that number one seed. And then, and that was after Sexton and Rubio got hurt. And then Garland got hurt. Then Caris got hurt after the trade. Rondo got hurt. Wade got hurt. Allen got hurt. Mobley got hurt. And then they've been on instead of a avalanche in terms of a collapse, not in terms of the points or epic runs that they've had. And, it's just a tough way to go. You've been on record even during the hot stretch where you were saying, this is all great. They're way ahead of schedule. No matter what the season ends, it's a success. And that was when all eyes were on them. And your point was valid then. It's still valid now. They could lose the rest of the season and get bounced out of the playoff contention, and it's still a success. The 42 points, I looked it up, most points on a non-LeBron team, 42 wins on a non-LeBron team since the 97-98 season. I mean, that's incredible. When most sports books out in Vegas had him pegged at like anywhere between 25 to 27 wins. You and I had him pegged at like 22.
Yeah, I think I said 24.
24, yeah.
Yeah.
So, hey, it's not over yet. It sucks that it's happening because everything's out of their control. But when it rains, it pours. Still a lot of basketball left in terms of the regular season and what they can do in the play-in tournament. Sam, let's take a break right here because coming up after this commercial break, I want to talk about a couple of things. We're going to update the standings because the Nets lost tonight to the Bucks in overtime. We're going to go through the final games of the season. But what I'd like to talk about is something, 2 points. One, rethinking that Caris LeVert trade because he has not really panned out the way we all thought he did. Because I had a debate with a buddy of mine about it. And a different buddy, I had a debate about the draft lottery and if the Cavs are better off, phoning it in, getting bounced out of contention so they had that protected pick back from the Pacers. I want your take on that and much more coming up right after this break.
Hey everyone, this is Mike Voorhees.
And I'm Brian Shaw. No, not the pitcher. We're the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast, formerly a Swing and a Tribe.
Don't have time to watch 162 games of baseball? We do. We have you covered with recaps of the games, stats, and analysis throughout the MLB season.
Subscribe now to Guardians of the Land and press play pods for all your Cleveland sports analysis.
What's up, everyone? Chase Smith here, host of the Chase Smith podcast, and my podcast reflects who I am. My hobbies, my interests, my passions, my curiosities, my careers, my questions, and my family. I'll spend time talking about all types of sports, movies, TV shows, trending news stories, and other cultural events, and even faith. This is who I am, and I hope I can get to know you as well. Join me on the Chase Smith podcast, and let's have some thought-provoking conversations, only on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Looking for new insights on the Cleveland sports scene with a unique side of Cleveland sports history? Then you found the perfect podcast. I'm John Sabol.
And I'm Scott Sabol, and we're hosts of the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, a podcast about Cleveland sports, but not your typical podcast about the land's sports teams. Join us as we embark on a journey of sharing a unique and historical side of Cleveland sports history with the help of some former Cleveland sports stars and other historical figures.
All right here on the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. And welcome back to Cavs on the Break, NBA podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm John Sabol alongside Hoops Wire's owner, editor, writer, Sam Amico. Follow Sam at Amico Hoops on Twitter. Follow us on the pod at Cavs on the Break. Follow me at John_Sabol. Sam, we just kind of rehash the obvious that's been going on with the Cavs over the last months or so with all the injuries and in this downward spiral here, losing of 5 of the last 6 games with 5 to go. The Knicks on Saturday, followed by the Sixers, Magic, Nets, and then the Bucks. A couple of things. One, let's talk about what a lot of fans have been talking about on Twitter. And a buddy of mine, Justin, was asking me, you know what? The Cavs are better off just losing the last 5 games and then getting out of the play-in game. And that way the Cavs, that protected lottery pick that they had against that they sent to Indiana in the Caris LeVert trade, they get it back. I texted you that same thing a couple of days ago, asking you to get clarification on that protected pick because there's a lot of confusion out there. So it is protected. If the Cavs fall out of contention, they do get that pick back, correct?
Yeah, if they finish with one of the first 14 worst records in the NBA, they get that pick back. Yeah.
Okay. So would they be better off? How about
no?
You said, yeah, go ahead. Tell our listeners here what I told my buddy Justin, what you told me, and what I told him, but tell them why that's an absolute bad idea.
Well, first of all, they traded that pick, frankly, because they didn't think they needed it and they don't want it. They didn't trade it because it's like, well, it's all we can do to get LeVert. They felt like this is all we don't want to deal with this. We don't. This draft is not supposed to be it's supposed to be a down year for the draft. They're not going to land in the top. Probably wouldn't land in the top 10 even if they do get that pick back. And John, frankly, they don't need another young player. They have a lot of very talented young players. Now, that's not to say it would be a bad thing if they ended up with their pick, a lottery pick, and they end up with a 13th, 14th pick, and well, then you make the most of it. But that's not been the mission this year. And they're not going to even consider that as a possibility when it comes to what their goals are. They're not going to think, you know what, let's just fade here, get a draft pick, because frankly, they don't need another young player. What they need is for the young players that they have now, they need to have them all on the court at the same time. They could draft somebody at 13 and 14, somewhere in that range, 12, 13, 14, who might never see the floor next year, because they're so loaded with young talent. So, I mean, there are some things to consider when it comes to the draft, but I could tell you this, the Cavs will be wildly disappointed if they end up, and this isn't a big secret. They don't want to be playing the lottery this year. They want to make the most out of what was a really good start. And from a personal perspective, I've seen them play the lottery enough, and I think that they've done very well there. So, win as many games as you can, get into the, you're probably not going to get into the top 6 seeds. Okay. But get into the play-in tournament, win a game, and get some playoff experience. And if you want another young player, go out and trade for one. Go out and trade for one who's played in the league. They don't need another guy that they're going to bring along. And I mean, who are they going to draft at 12, 13, 14? It may be somebody who's no better than, and this isn't an insult to the guy, it's a compliment. It may be somebody who's no better than Brandon Goodwin. It may be somebody who's no better than Moses Brown. If you get really lucky, it could be, but these are guys who have NBA experience. So I just don't think there's any point in thinking we got to play the lottery. Now, it may work out that way. I doubt it, but it could, where they end up with one of the 14 in the second lower half of the overall NBA standings. And sure, then make the most of your pick if you get it, but don't set your sights on that with 5 games left. I think that'd be kind of silly.
So the lottery put them at the top 10.
The top 14
or top 14, excuse me. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
looking at the top. I'm looking at the 10 teams currently eliminated from the playoffs. So I thought of 10, the top 14. And I'm not going to act like I know all these players in the NBA draft, but everything that I've read, just because I like reading about the NBA. And of course, I like reading on hoopswire.com, except the last few days when you gave me shout outs.
I like the disclaimer.
Yeah. Especially, despite when you've given me shout outs in the columns and I didn't see it. You write about the draft, you write about, this is going to be stocked with talent, yada, yada, yada. And it's just not. This is going to be a very weak draft.
That's the philosophy going in. Now, there's always going to be one or two guys who you end up coming out of nowhere, But look, if you're the Cavs, you don't have a lottery pick. Let's say you end up not getting a lottery pick, which is what they're hoping to do. And Hey, Giannis Antetokounmpo and Kawhi Leonard both draft number 15. So
yeah, it's funny. My buddy Justin texted me. He's like, "Well, Giannis was a 15th pick." Yeah, but that was a once in a generational thing, and no one knew the skinny kid from Greece was going to turn into be an MVP player, NBA champion, and top 2-3 player in the league. It's just a silly excuse. Sorry, I mean a silly example because there hasn't been enough talent in the back end and middle round of that draft just recently. I mean, recently in the last, few years that have really gained any momentum to want to be there, because the drafts lately have been very front loaded. They haven't been very deep in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. I had one scout tell me probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, said that this entire draft, they're kind of viewing it, not the Cavs, this guy's team are kind of viewing it as an entire draft of late first round talent and second round talent. So there's not a lot to get real excited about.
Right. All right. So that was point number one. And I completely agree with you. And plus the other thing is we didn't talk about is you go in the play-in game and you get swept by Brooklyn. That's good. I mean, it's not good in terms of it's not good because you
want
lose.
That experience. That experience is much more valuable to a younger team than bringing in some 6'5" guy from Vanderbilt or whatever. No offense, Darius Garland, but you're just better off. It's a better learning experience for you to go into the playoffs, lose, even if you get swept, to play for something. This team needs to continue to feel like the organization wants to play for something, and the organization very much does.
Totally agree with you. Doesn't matter the sport. My 15 years covering professional sports or in sports broadcasting, could be baseball, basketball, football, hockey, even college. Coaches will tell you need playoff postseason experience, no matter if you're projected to go far or not, because that is invaluable experience. You can't coach that. You can't replicate that in a practice. You can't do anything. That alone is going to help you in more ways than one, especially if you're a very young team. This knock on this Cavs team, when they were even healthy and clicking, is that they were young. We always talk about it. They're young, the young and dumb thing. They don't know what they don't know. They're just they're playing with house money. They're playing like there's no pressure. And but they had there's no experience when the times are rough for them to persevere. Hence why you need that playoff experience.
JB Bickerstaff talks about that all the time. The reality is what he says. And the reality is we have not experienced, we're a younger group and we haven't experienced some of these bigger games, like say the Atlanta Hawks, who were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year.
Yeah, people forget about that.
So, or the Dallas Mavericks that they lost to the night before, who have been in a lot of big games. The Mavericks are fighting for playoff position themselves in the Western Conference. So the Cavs just don't have that experience. But you get into the playoffs and get that type of experience, and then you realize, how we have to play in these type of situations. We're more confident because we've been in that situation. It helps immensely. And you're right. That is universal, sports wide. It's not just the NBA. It's every sport anywhere. Playing in the biggest moments makes you better understand how to handle those big moments when you face them again.
Other point I want to talk to you about, the Caris LeVert trade has not lived up to what we thought it was going to be. Granted, he has missed a ton of games with that sprained foot the day after the All-Star break when he sprained it in practice. He's only played in 13 games, including tonight, since being traded to Cleveland back in the trade deadline in early February. And the thing that we talked about last week in last week's episode is one thing that you're looking for in this team is you want to see Caris start scoring around that 15 to 20, 21 point per game range, just to kind of get in the swing of things. That really hasn't happened much. I mean, he dropped 32 points against Dallas, but that's the most points he's scored since his second game as a member of the Cavaliers, which was on February 11th against the Pacers, his former team. He hasn't, he's only averaging in his granted, it's a small sample size in 13 games. He's only averaging 13.8 points a game. So 14 points a game. I don't think his foot's healthy. He'll never admit that it's not. He's not going to make excuses. But B, the more glaring issue is the chemistry. There is no chemistry with him. And this is in defense to him because everyone's been hurt and they haven't had the whole unit on the floor. And his play and his skills have not been really being able to, it hasn't really been meshing well on everything. So he has a tendency to go more one-on-one ISO ball, which can hurt him. And that's actually a knock on him in general, even with his Brooklyn days and then the Pacers days. But still, revisiting that trade, Sam, looking at it now, with all that being said, you still make that move?
Yeah, I still make the move because they didn't really. I mean, you gave up Ricky Rubio, who was done for the year with his knee injury, so you didn't lose that. You did give up your pick at the time. You're assuming, at the time you made that trade, I think the Cavs would have been drafting like 22nd or 23rd.
Yeah.
So based on their record,
and now it would be at like, assuming they go to the play-in tournament and they get bounced, it's somewhere going to be between 15 and 11 and
I would
16.
say in the middle of the first round. Yeah.
Yes, probably I would say about 17.
Sure. And that's okay too, because whoever you get at 17 or 15 probably isn't going to be as good of a player as Caris LeVert. I think that the foot injury really set things back. And then, as you mentioned, he comes back and then you lose your two best big players in Allen and Mobley. And when he came back, he was coming off the bench. He's kind of working his way back in. I just think it's not only Caris LeVert getting adjusted to his teammates and his coaching staff, but they're also getting adjusted to him and figuring out how best he fits, how best to use him. And you're doing it when he may not, like you said, he may not be completely healthy. His game has always been what we saw the way he played in Indiana. When he first came here, and I don't know if it was his first game or second game with the Cavs, might have been maybe a second, but he went there and he scored 22 points. He helped the Cavs come back to win at Indiana. And that's the Caris LeVert that I suspect we will see. I think since then, the foot injury again, then you went almost right into the All-Star break, which, you get so much time off there. And then he suffers the injury and he misses a lot of time. I just think that we need to wait to judge that trade based on next season. That's not something that's a strong point of fans and some media, having some perspective and having some patience, because really, and I think that we see Jared Allen, even how much he has improved in terms of fit just by getting in a full training camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to never judge a player and his fit with his new team until he gets in a full training camp, because that's when they really feel like I'm really entrenched as a Cleveland Cavalier or whatever team you're playing for. So I would just wait to reserve judgment on that deal. I still think it was a good deal because you have Allen and Mobley back, and then you have Darius Garland, still healthy, staying healthy. And then you have LeVert and Markkanen, and you really have five guys who are capable of hitting the 25 to 30 point range on any given night. So I just think we can't pass judgment on what they're doing without two of their big three. And I think LeVert's going to be a nice player for them. And this trade will look really good once he and the team have more of an opportunity to get acclimated to each other.
And I agree completely with everything you're saying. I think it's too early to judge that. I bring that up because you see, and you love Twitter, Sam. Let me tell you, you are.
I say it's the second worst place ever.
Second behind
hell is first,
With
and
hell being
hell only beats it by like a whisker. But yeah, but anyway, I do like interacting with fans and all, so I don't want to downplay that. But the people who aren't fans, who are just on there just to cause trouble, yeah, I could live without them.
What about when they hack your account and make you a skull too?
Yeah, that's not so bad. I got a couple days off.
There you go. But you see people on Twitter, Cavs fans, debate this stuff, which is silly, but
sure.
It's a topic of discussion with some media members too, other writers and everything. And it's not necessarily they believe it; they're just writing topics just to write topics, and it's totally fine. It's all fair. I totally agree with you what you're saying. You can't judge that trade now. You got to give them more time. A friend of mine. Well, same friend of mine that brought up the whole lottery fiasco brought up a point, and we talked about this particular player when the Cavs were talking about trading guys around the deadline. The Buddy Hield, would Buddy Hield make an impact on this team? I think the reason why, and what we talked about before, was the Cavs didn't want that extra money. They didn't want to spend the extra money because he's owed more, and he's owed more, and he's locked in long term. I think there was a chemistry issue there. I know he's a better shooter, but I don't know if that would mesh well with the current big lineup. But and granted, I think he get traded to Indiana.
Yeah. Yes, he did.
But a player like that, though, right now, you almost kind of need a good shooter because everyone else is hurt. Of course, it looks better now to have someone like that. What ifs, right? But I don't see that being a fit long term either. If that were to happen,
he definitely, he's definitely a better perimeter shooter. He's very streaky.
We got enough streaky players on this team, i.e. Chetty Osman.
Well, yeah, I mean, they do. Kevin Love.
Those guys are,
and that's not a knock. They're role players off the bench. I think LeVert has a better, as an individual player, is a better player, but he just needs some time to fit. I think, Hield's a nice player. I just don't know that and he's not a problem. I just don't know that he has kind of the winning mentality that at least at this level that LeVert brings. And I would still make that trade because, again, talk to me in January and I'll let you know. But right now, I'd still make that trade. It's not like Buddy Hield's tearing it up in Indiana or something. He's doing what he's always done, and that's some games he'll score 25, and the next game he'll score 3 or 8 or something. And I know LeVert is doing that right now, but again, I think it's a different situation, and he was injured, and he deserves a little bit more time. Whereas Buddy Hield was not injured, and he's the same player he's always been, which is up and down.
Well, I think that goes to say something, Sam, because when you look at LeVert's past, he played for Brooklyn in their down years, then when they got good again, and basically they dumped him for their money when the whole Harden trade came in there. Buddy Hield was a guy, in my opinion, that has played for nothing but losers. I mean, Pelicans, Kings, Pacers are in rebuild mode. It's not his fault, but you want someone to have at least a little bit more experience. I've heard that LeVert is a better locker room guy than Hield. Maybe that's more the attitude.
I've heard that too. And that's why I said, I don't think Hield's a problem. LeVert is a better locker room guy. He's been in more situations. He's, he's had some severe injuries.
Yeah.
And he's just always, he's just a team guy. He's trying to fit in. He wants to fit in. He's not out here to try to lead the team in scoring or worry about how many shots he gets. He wants to win basketball games. And I think fans will see that once he's acclimated a little bit more, as this guy's a winner. He wants to win. I don't know that Hield is that player. I don't know enough about Buddy Hield other than when he gets hot, he's hard to stop.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. And the Cavs could use some perimeter shooting, but I think LeVert's a more complete basketball player. And like you said, John, a better locker room guy.
Hey, before we wrap this up, I wanted to talk more about the play-in game here, but we were talking about Chetty a second ago. He had 21 points tonight, haven't played in the last 2 games, healthy scratch, coach's decision. Do you know why he was in the doghouse?
I do not. I don't know that many people know why. He's been, Chetty's up and down, which you can live with because he's your eighth man or whatever.
Yeah.
But I just think that the coaching staff and Coach Bickerstaff thought we're going to try to take a look at some of these other guys and see if maybe they don't have the big outbursts that Chetty is capable of in terms of being able to score and be electric. Chetty plays one speed. He's got the pedal to the metal at all times. So maybe that they just kind of viewed it as, let's see what some of these other guys can do. And could always be the case. And I don't know that this is a fact. I'm just throwing it out there as pure speculation. Could be something at practice where he was loafing or viewed as loafing, or something along those lines. I don't know that that's the case. I've gotten no indication. But when somebody is in the rotation and just suddenly glued to the bench, usually it's more than stuff that we as media members and fans are seeing.
I think because he's a good character guy, he's a fun-loving guy.
Sure.
Teammates and players love him, right? And coaches like them too. So I'm speculating here, like you're speculating. I think something must have happened in that Bulls game, because he only played 6 minutes in that game and hadn't touched the floor until today against Atlanta.
Yeah.
So maybe you're right. Maybe coach was like, I don't like your effort or something or whatever. But I was just curious if you do. No. Okay, but before we conclude this episode here on the Cavs on the Break NBA podcast, right now as it sits here on March 31st, as the calendar has now flipped to April 1st. We are now on Friday at 12:30 here in the morning. The Brooklyn Nets lost a heartbreaker to the Milwaukee Bucks in overtime. Giannis went off with 44 points. Thank you. And Durant missed a game-winning shot at the buzzer. So that win by the Bucks helps the Cavs immensely. So now they are still 2 games up on Brooklyn for that 7th spot in the play-in game. Cavs with 5 to play. They have 5 games remaining. They're pretty much clinched. They haven't clinched officially, but they're 2.5 games back of Toronto. And as it sits now, they're probably just going to be in this play-in game, unfortunately. Even though they own that tiebreaker against Toronto, it doesn't really matter because if Toronto's up in the standings, it's irrelevant. However, the Raptors are clicking at the right time, man. They've won 4 straight, including against the Cavs. They've got a favorable schedule. Partially, they've got 1 extra game than the Cavs. They play Orlando, and then they have Miami, Atlanta, Philly, which is tough. And then they finish with Houston and New York, 2 teams that are out of the playoffs, and who knows what they're going to be doing. Interesting thing here. Cavs play the Knicks on Saturday, Sam. Knicks got eliminated from the playoff contention tonight. You got to wonder what kind of effort they're going to put forth on Saturday. I don't love this matchup against the Nets. If this happens, it's probably going to happen. No one really does. You wanted that 6th seed to face Milwaukee or Boston. But real quick here, we got 5 to play. What are your thoughts on potentially playing Brooklyn?
I think that's the most realistic scenario right now. Toronto, like you said, has a lot of home games. They've got a couple toughies in there, but unless the Cavs get back at least either Allen or Mobley, which I've heard is a possibility in these last 5 games, we're hearing the Cavs are optimistic that Allen will return before the playoffs. Well, that gives them 5 games to return. I think it probably will be too late. The good news is the Nets or the Bucks may kind of be locked into their playoff spot in those final 2 games. So that would give the Cavs an opportunity to win those games and maybe, with a stroke of luck, catch Toronto, tie their record, and then get the 6th seed. I think that that's not a realistic scenario. I think that they're going to probably be playing Brooklyn in that first game. And if hey, look, if you're the Cavs, you can win that game if you have your guys. You really can. Because when they had their guys, they showed that they're capable of beating anybody. Mm-hmm. So, that's all you got to focus on right now. If you're the Cavs is, hey, let's just go beat the Knicks. Let's take it from there. Let's get a win at Madison Square Garden, because that always seems to revive teams when they do that. So if they can just look at it that way and don't try to get caught up and looking too far ahead, and just take care of your own business, and then start feeling good about yourselves again and not really kind of back your way into the play-in tournament, but go in it feeling kind of good about yourself. Then anything can happen. And look, this team has shown they're capable of, if they get things corrected, they can go on a nice little run, and this would be the time of year to do it. So, and John, we've said this a million times, even if they go in the play-in tournament, they don't get, it'd be disappointing if they get knocked out of the playoffs and aren't able to participate in a 7-game series. Be disappointment, but look, this team is when they're healthy, they've shown what they can do, and they have a real bright future, and that's really where the focus should be. And then you just hope for better luck next year at the end of the year, and you have all your main players on the floor.
How about this scenario real quick, Sam? What if you shut down Mobley and Allen, don't rush them back for the final 5 games? Okay. And let's say you beat New York and you drop the last 4, Philly, Orlando, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, which is interesting. The 2 teams that they potentially be playing and fighting for, Brooklyn and Milwaukee, they'd be playing. If Milwaukee has that seed already locked in, they may rest Giannis and just cruise in that game too. That's something to keep your eye on. But think about this. What if you beat New York, Allen and Mobley are getting there, but you shut them down? Well, Mobley's done that. He's not playing against New York anyways, and he's probably not going to play against Philly. But what if you just, instead of being in that 7th spot, what if you slip to that 8th or 9th seed? Okay, Nets move up, Charlotte and Atlanta, one of those move up, and you're either the 9th or 10th seed in the play-in game. Okay, and you're going to face one of those teams, and easier game, winnable game.
Sure,
you beat them. Then you bring Mobley and Allen back in the first round. Now you're not playing Milwaukee or Boston that would either be the 2 or 3 seed because they keep flip-flopping. Now you're playing Miami number 1. I mean, Miami's tough, don't get me wrong, but I like I don't mind that matchup more so than I do against Milwaukee when you have your bigs.
Yeah, sure.
What are your thoughts on that scenario before we finish this?
Well, I think that, you're going to be cautious with Allen and Mobley for that reason, because you're hoping to have them for the play-in tournament. That's when you really want them. I think that you might bring them back a little bit early, just so that they're not coming back in the biggest game of the year.
Yep, great point.
Bring them back for the Bucks or the Nets. They're one of those last 2 games, just even on limited minutes, so that the pressure's off. Like, well, now you're back, and now we're playing the biggest game of the season against either the Nets or the Hawks or the Hornets or whoever. So, here we go. I think that I would like to see them get a game under their belts before they play in the play-in tournament, if possible. But, you're not going to be able to avoid the Nets, I don't think, unless they should get really hot and past Chicago, which I don't even know that that's possible right now, because Chicago's playing well too. So to me, if you're the Cavs, just try to rediscover what was working for you early this year, whether you have Mobley and Allen for these last 5 games or not. Just try to find that determination and that will that, yes, we can, and we're gonna, and if you can win 2 of these final 5, feel pretty decent about yourself going into the play-in tournament, and you get the good fortune of getting your 2 big guys back. They should be okay. So I don't know, John. I guess I didn't answer your question at all, but I just think that your approach has to be, obviously right now every game's kind of a playoff game. We got to get ready to play and feel good about ourselves going into the real playoffs, or in this case, the real NCAA like play-in tournament.
Yeah, man. I agree that the funny thing is, if you bring a guy back like that, you want a game rep in there before your biggest game, and that's totally fair. But I think if you slip out of that 7 seed, you get down to 8 or 9. It's not necessarily a bad thing either.
No, I don't think that. I don't think as long as you finish there, as long as you're in the play-in tournament, the seeding really doesn't matter that much in the play-in tournament. Just get in it, win your games, and get into the regular playoffs. That's, when you're in the play-in tournament, that's what it's all about. And as far as the seeds, who really cares? You may have to play the Nets either way, so I don't think it matters much.
And the Cavs will be going to the playoffs no matter what. They haven't clinched a playoff spot yet, but they're already going to be
a play-in. Yeah, they're going to a play-in tournament. Yeah,
play-in game for sure. So, all right, man, they'll wrap it up here on this finely tuned edition of Cavs on the Break at NBA podcast. We want to thank you guys listening out there. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button, and you can get updates on your phone via Apple or Spotify. A big shout out to the Press Play Podcast Network for making this happen. And thanks to our friends at Aligned Health Center for sponsoring this show. If you haven't already, head on over to alignedhealthcenters.com for any of your health issues there. Sam, this has been real. Fans can continue to follow you on Twitter at Amico Hoops, read you at hoopswire.com, all the latest Cavs, NBA, NBA draft. I'm sure you're going to be putting out a mock draft anytime soon, right?
I'm going to as soon as the regular season ends. Yeah, then we'll do one after the lottery as well.
I was
actually 2 or 3 after the lottery. Actually,
I was being sarcastic there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. As soon as the Cavs are eliminated from whatever they postseason play they take part in, I'll put out the mock draft.
There you go.
And I might even give you another shout out. Who knows?
I will be reading this time. I promise.
I hope.
Yeah.
I was waiting for the text or the call of thanks. Nothing.
Yeah, I gotta watch calling and talking on the phone because we're bad luck. Apparently, car accidents.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. But thanks for listening, everyone. Again, you can follow us on the pod at Cavs on the Break. On Twitter, follow me at John_Sabol. You can follow my other podcast at Sabol Brothers. And you can watch me at Fox 8 in Cleveland. Sam, until next time, buddy, we'll be talking again. By this time, I think we'll be next time you and I get together. Well, I think we'll be entering the final week of the regular season before we get into the playoffs. So until then, have a good one. And we shall talk again soon, buddy.
All right. That sounds good to me. And hang in there. And I promise to watch you on television for the first time here soon as well. So I look forward to that. And I'm sure we will chat very shortly.
Sam, you're supposed to be watching it all the time, but and I know you have a website and other primary.
I doze off. I doze off.
Doze off.
Yeah.
I don't blame you. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. We really appreciate it. And we'll check you guys out next time. Thanks.
Congratulations, Cleveland. Your decades-long wait is finally over. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.